Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 1619 project discussion for March 18. This is the Pasadena Village. We're part of the Village Movement, nationwide Village Movement. And today we're entered to have a special introduction from the local members of the local chapter of Coming to the Table, which is also a national organization. So they're going to tell us, Wilson Bell and Allison Thomas are our two speakers. They lead our local group here in Los Angeles, and they're going to tell us about the national group and a little bit about themselves, and then take questions from the participants. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wilson. Wilson, take it away. It's all yours.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for welcoming us here.
Wilson, let me interrupt you. I'm going to mute everybody and then let you unmute yourself here, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Ready? Okay. So Allison, would you just share your screen briefly right now? And then I will, we'll swap back and forth. But okay. Right now we're just gonna share right now our presentation screen. Don't worry. And we're gonna be really relaxed because so I always say this at Coming to the Table, and today you're going to be a part of it. Our Coming to the Table is a family. That is what we are building. We're building family at Coming to the Table. So we have white and black and orange and green and purple brothers and sisters at the table. And we figure out how to make family happen. So thank you again for having us here and inviting us. Before we get deeply into it, I just want to have my colleague and I give you our names and what area in the city that we currently live in, so you don't sit for 2 to 3 minutes wondering who we are. So as Dick mentioned, I'm Wilson Bell, and I live in Van Nuys area of Los Angeles. I am on the steering committee with Allison. Allison, would you introduce yourself?
You're not going to say more about yourself?
I'm not going to say more right now. Just this is just okay. Who we are and where we're from.
All right, I'm Allison. Okay, I'm Allison Thomas on the steering committee of the Pasadena, Southern California group of Coming to the Table, and I live up in the Hollywood Hills.
Okay, so as you may not be able to tell, we're very excited to be here to share the work that's happening in many directions regarding racial history in the United States, racial equality, and racial connections. And Allison and I, as we've mentioned, are on the steering committee of the local chapter, one of the local chapters actually, of Coming to the Table in Los Angeles. We're in the Southern California Pasadena chapter. And that brings us to, because Coming to the Table has some, what I like to call, I borrow this phrase, big, hairy, audacious goals. It's important to be clear about what those goals are and who Coming to the Table is, right? So that people know what the goals are that they're getting into when they're considering getting involved with the group. And Coming to the Table asks for commitment to its goals and to all the people around the table. The work that we do in Coming to the Table in some ways is very simple, but it is not easy. In fact, it's very, very hard sometimes in some ways. So we don't want to scare people away, but we do want to prepare them for what they are entering into as they consider coming to the table. So to that end, we've started an orientation process to give people an awareness of who Coming to the Table is and what we try to do. And that's what we're going to share with you today. Now, I'll share with you some of the background before Allison and I will take a moment to dig deeper into introducing ourselves and telling you some of our personal story and what brought us, each one of us, to Coming to the Table. Is that good?
I can barely hear you.
Okay, great. So let me
your volume.
Turn up my volume. Absolutely. Let me do that. I'm gonna do it here. There we go. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Better, but it could go even higher.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Higher.
Okay.
Yeah, you're very soft spoken today. I don't know. It's not the usual.
Yeah, I'm in a lobby, and so I'm trying not to disturb other
Oh,
people as
okay.
well.
Ah,
So
Oh,
okay.
that's good.
that hold up
Okay.
the mic here. Yeah.
All right, good. All right, so there we go.
Yeah.
All right, cool beans. So now I am going to share my screen with you and go to slideshow view. All right, get this out of the way. So here's an outline of what we're going to be doing today. So we did as a brief greeting and talking about what we're going to be doing today, what we're talking about in terms of coming to the table. And so these are some of the other things in this outline that we're going to try to get through today. Background of coming to the table, national and local, deeper dive into Allison and my story and what brought us here, and definitions and tools we use as we work through coming to the table. And then we'll enter into some dialogue and specifically talk about some vocabulary words that that we engage in and work through in coming to the table, and that we find actually just on an overall level, global level, might be something that is helpful for us to explore in terms of talking about racial issues. And then we are going to talk about, just briefly, look at some of the intersections between what we're doing and coming to the table and your 1619 group. And then, of course, we'll make an invitation to all of you to join coming to the table. So, as I said in the outline here, I'll start with coming to the table at the national level. So you can find coming to the table just by doing a search, if you're familiar with the internet, and doing searches in Yahoo or Google or whatever search engine you have, put in coming to the table and it will pop up. And if you go to the site, you'll see the vision and the mission statements. And it's pretty clear if you read the statement as it is up here on the board, on the screen, the coming to the table vision for the United States is of a just and truthful society that acknowledges and seeks to heal from the racial wounds of the past, from slavery and the many forms of racism it spawned. Its mission, the mission of coming to the table, is to provide leadership, resources, and a supportive environment for all who wish to acknowledge and heal wounds from racism that is rooted in the United States history of slavery. So let's just let that sit for a minute, for a few seconds, and understand what the overall purpose at the national level is when we enter in coming to the table. Coming to the table's foundation is uncovering history, researching, acknowledging, and sharing personal, family, community, state, and national histories of race with openness and honesty. And so a lot of times in the discussions, a lot of times in the events that are happening at the national and local level, there are things that help to engage us at a family, a community, state level, and each chapter may pick a certain place or emphasis that they're interested in. We're particularly interested in making connections across racial lines, working towards healing and taking action. And action doesn't always mean being in a protest. It doesn't always mean writing letters. It doesn't always mean making phone calls. It could mean any of those things and all of them. So Then when we get to our local chapter, this is really important for us. We align with the national organization, particularly focusing on providing a supportive environment for all who wish to acknowledge and heal wounds from racism that is rooted in the United States history of slavery. So for us, our local chapter, we really want to focus on having a supportive environment and to help nurture the people within our group, give them information, support so that they can go out and really impact their community, the people that they come in contact with, but also to impact to them and hello, and have encouragement to actually enter into the same kind of conversations that we have in the organization. So we want people to be actively anti-racist by elevating Black voices and by helping to get white people comfortable in their discomfort. This doesn't negate other kinds of white trauma that they may be experiencing. So I'm gonna skip this. I'll tell you, our Pasadena meetings are the third Saturdays of the month. They
So we have a meeting tomorrow.
Yes, we have a
You
meeting
could join
tomorrow.
us tomorrow if you want.
Yes, and we have a group that branched out from within our Pasadena group, Culver City meetings. They happen the second Fridays each month from 7 to 9. Fran Sutton has started that chapter, and she's been a longtime member of our organization and moved on to start that, which is actually really exciting for us because we want to grow numbers within our group. That's a great thing. But what we would really love is to spread the word and to spread the, to widen the table. So if we get people from within our group starting other chapters, hallelujah. Okay, that's a great thing. National virtual local groups meet month on Zoom too. That's at the national level. Okay, I've gone through just the basic foundational information around coming to the table, and I want to take a step back and engage with you right now with just the synopsis that I gave you. Is there any feedback or questions at this point? Are there any? Don't be afraid. I want you to talk to me. I want you to talk to us. Okay. I'm sure.
Wilson, one of the things that I think is very interesting about the coming to the table is the touchstones. And I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but not necessarily reading all of them, but I just found the touchstones very important as a part of coming to the table.
In fact, Jim, we are going to talk about the touchstones. This is an interesting thing because I am being quiet. I have the volume up really loud, and when you guys talk to me, it's like it's really loud. So just be aware of that because it feels like I'm being attacked, and I know you don't mean it. Okay, so there are a couple of things that we do in coming to the table that we think help us to work and to have really effective conversation. And one of the things that we practice is the circle process. Now, it's a little weird in Zoom because when we meet in person and when we met in person before COVID, in the before times, we would sit in a circle. And the circle process comes from Native American traditions, as you can read here. And it was practiced in different Native American tribes differently, but the essential part of it was that there was a circle. Each person was then given a moment to share uninterruptedly what was on their heart about whatever the topic was. And you got to have everybody in the circle go around that. The goal, again, fostering connection and fostering respect for the person and their voice. And so that's one of the things that we practice in our process at coming to the table. And to Dick's point, the next thing that we do is something that I would like some assistance from, if you would all humor me, is what we do every meeting. We use what we call the touchstones. And I would like it if I could get each of you, or there are 14 of them, if I can get people to read them, I would love to do that. Would anybody object to reading them as we go along, if I call you out? If you can see it, I'll try to make the things as big as possible. And if you feel like you do not want to read it, just say no, and I'll ask somebody else. Okay, so let me read what the touchstones are, because I think the touchstones, they did a lot of work on putting these together, and they're beautiful and they make sense. And as people who are engaged in coming to the table will tell you, many of us carry these not just in coming to the table, but throughout our lives, because they have that kind of impact. Touchstones are an established set of mutually agreed upon principles that guide how participants will treat and be with each other in deep dialogue using the coming to the table approach. They aim to address participants' needs and expectations to feel safe and or brave enough to speak openly and honestly, and help us make more space for each other. So that is the overarching goal of the touchstones. With that, I'll read the first one, and then I'll call on Allison, and then I'll keep calling on people. And as I said, if you would not like to read, you don't have to, but it would just be very helpful if you did. Okay. I'm going to start now. Be 100% present, extending and presuming welcome. Set aside the usual distractions of things undone, things to do. Bring all of yourself to the experience. We all learn more effectively in welcoming spaces. Welcome others here and presume that you are welcomed. Allison?
Turn down your volume. Listen deeply. Listen intently to what is said. Listen to the feelings beneath the words. To listen another soul into life, into a condition of disclosure and discovery, may be almost the greatest service that any human being ever performs for another. Douglas Steere. Listen to yourself also. Strive to achieve a balance between listening and reflecting, speaking and acting.
Sharon Jarrett.
Try it on. Make an opening for new ideas by trying them on for size. Give yourself the time to get to know them, to consider how they fit you.
Jury Lewis.
Always try invitation. It is never share or die. You'll be invited to share in pairs, small groups, and in the large group. The invitation is exactly that. You will determine the extent to which you want to participate in our discussions or activities.
Lynn.
No fixing. Each of us is here to discover his or her own truth. We're not here to set someone else straight or to help right another's wrong, to fix or to correct what we perceive as broken or incorrect in another member of the group.
Melva. Did you hear me, Melva?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Identify assumptions. Suspend judgments. Our assumptions, although usually invisible to us, often undergird our worldwide view. Our judgments, frequently automatic, can block our growth. By pausing to identify assumptions and suspend judgments, to the degree possible or reasonable, we can listen to the other and to ourselves more fully.
Sally Curry.
Speak your truth. Say what is in your heart, trusting that your voice will be heard and your contribution respected, even if it is different from or even opposite of what another has said. Own your truth by speaking only for yourself, using I statements.
Lucinda.
Be aware of and allow the difference between intention and impact. Give yourself and others the grace of assuming that no one presents itself to harm others, while also being ready to acknowledge the words or behavior or actions, nonverbal communications, can have a harmful impact.
Did I miss anyone? Did everybody get a chance to read?
I can read.
Okay, go ahead, Rich. Dick.
This is
Oh,
I'm
Valerie.
sorry, go
Go ahead,
Valerie,
Valerie.
go ahead.
Okay, whenever possible, am I on the right one?
Yes, yes.
Okay, whenever possible, acknowledge uncomfortable responses. Say ouch or whoops, then explain. Let others know when you are responding with pain to remarks in the group, either from others, ouch, or yourself, whoops, especially when your feelings are impeding your ability to stay connected to others. Help them understand the reason for your reaction.
Is there anybody else that I missed?
Sandra and Vicky.
Okay, Sandra.
You're muted, Sandra.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
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 Okay. Respect silence. Silence is a rare gift. After someone has spoken, take time to reflect and fully listen without immediately filling the space with words.
And the last person I missed?
Vicky.
Maintain confidentiality. Create a safe space by respecting the confidential nature and content of discussions in the circle. What is said in the circle remains here.
Respect difference. Recognize that different cultures have different norms for speaking in groups, such as interrupting or degrees of assertiveness. There may be differences regarding power dynamics. Overemphasis on norms of politeness and safety, for example, can be an unconscious way to reinforce white fragility and prevent expressions of anger. When things are difficult, turn to wonder. Try both and rather than either or. When someone else's truth challenges your own, try turning to wonder. I wonder what brought her to this place. I wonder what my reaction teaches me. Also, allow for the possibility of multiple experiences and perspectives. Let both and create a larger shared space. Expect non-closure. Stay in the present. We probably won't get to the end of the road today. Remember that coming to the table is the first step. Staying at the table, staying conscious and committed is the key to racial healing and transformation. And those are our touchstones. Okay, let's just take a second, take a breath. And I would like to just, in this moment, ask you, what are you experiencing after reading those and hearing them?
Let's stop sharing for a minute, Wilson, so we can see each
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
Much
Go
nicer.
ahead. Yeah.
What I heard basically were the ground rules that I used to lay out. I'm a therapist. And when I did therapy groups, there were all the things about safety, confidentiality, not attacking someone else, and those kinds of things to make it a safe place to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? That's great. It's a great observation, and it's great acknowledgement, actually, for us.
What I'm thinking is, I think it sounds wonderful, and I wonder if we can really do it.
I love that. I love that. I would just say, go ahead, Allison.
I was just gonna say, we spend a lot of time focusing on one or two or three of, different ones at different meetings to show how maybe it went astray one meeting, or how to lean into it harder and to develop it more, because they are, even though what we've noticed reading them every month is that we almost want to quote them to people. We're not getting to the end of each day. Calm down, in our daily life, it's become so internalized to us after all these years, but it definitely requires practice, right? Practice and commitment.
Yes. And I would just support you in saying it is possible. But as Allison said, it's practice. And we fail sometimes, but we get back up.
My first reaction in hearing these things was, wow, these are good rules for any serious conversation with someone.
Vicki had her hand up.
Go ahead, Vicki.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I appreciate especially Allison saying that you typically go more in depth on them, because they're not to be glossed over. I've done a little bit of DEI training in the past, and one thing that sort of hit me like a ton of bricks was consider impact over intention. And we're all such good people. Everybody knows we're good people. It's okay when we say something, they'll understand. And it's like, I'm sorry, that's true and not true. I think that one is really, really important to understand in these types of conversations.
That's so great too. That was something Allison and I were talking about before, and Allison said, ask, which you already answered, right? Were there any that spoke to you more than others, or that rang out to you, that that really had that you connected to? And I'll tell you, for me, they all resonate at different times. Like, there have been moments when one is just like, there's that touchstone, right? Yeah, I mean, they all have moments. Like today when we were reading through, there are a couple that I really love, but there's the notion of silence and how valuable and precious that can be, because we all want to get our point across. And sometimes when somebody has said something, just taking a moment to not say anything and let it soak.
But that comment is almost a segue to some of our vocabulary, Wilson. I don't know, because it's 12:37.
Okay.
So we're 20 minutes.
So how much more time we have, Allison?
We got till 1:30.
Okay,
1:30.
so we're good, I think. All right, so that brings us to, though Allison is keeping us on track, which is a good thing. I want to get to my outline, which helps.
I wanted to give you some examples of how the touchstones resonate in the meeting with some concepts that go flying around here a lot that we thought would be worth exploring, as well as stories that Wilson and I can tell about things that have happened or mistakes we've made or conflicts we've worked through. Because it's not that coming to the table is a big shouting match or something where you, but as Sally said, you need to create a safe space so that people can be open and vulnerable, which means that if you're open, you can't be worried about making a mistake, otherwise you never talk, right?
Right.
You have to be willing to, as I have this on an index card on my desk, actually, you have to be humble and willing to fumble. You know, making mistakes is part of the process. And part of us, the training that I have as a white wasp, you know, in my DNA is that I don't like making mistakes. And I really don't like someone seeing me. I don't like being embarrassed. I don't like being you know, all those emotions. And we try to diffuse that by having these very structured rules that give us space to go, whoops, I'm sorry, I blew that. Or I hear the comment, I didn't mean that. As Vicki was saying, I didn't mean that, but I see that what I said caused harm and was easily misinterpreted or whatever, you know. So we thought that by giving some specifics, and it would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm also, yeah, give me 1 minute. I want to get to why, you know.
Is it okay to comment?
Absolutely.
I really appreciated the either or versus the both and. I was like, oh, that's the dichotomous thinking that got us into trouble in the first place, that made us so divided. And so I really appreciate the how the touchstones show us how to love a stranger, how to really be a neighbor. And so I was really touched by that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Allison, if we can, because I want us to use the time, if we can go to the outline and do now this is where we can do the same. We can do the same thing. Though, is we wanted to share a little bit of our individual backgrounds and what brought us to coming to the table. So you were leading in a little bit in that way direction, Allison. So kind of talk about your story. So
I joined Come to the Table in 2015, which it seems like it was yesterday. I'm amazed on the one hand. On the other hand, I have developed these deep relationships that are, you know, my Coming to the Table family in some ways is closer than my other family. And actually what I've learned to Come to the Table has helped me build stronger relationships with my family. So I descend from enslavers back to colonial Virginia. My 7th great grandfather was the richest man in Virginia when he died in 1732. And he had enslaved 1,000 people, had 300,000 acres and 10 million British pounds. So he was probably the richest man in the United States. But this was a history that my family never wrestled with and never thought deeply about as a child. Because I grew up in LA, I always thought, well, that wealth disappeared in one generation. He had 6, because I was always told he had 16 kids, he gave them each a piece and poof, it went away. But in fact, it was the opposite. His goal was to build a dynasty. He intermarried his children with the leading families of Virginia. And someday I will try to do the math, if I can, to figure out how much that wealth multiplied among those 16 kids. He was so farsighted that he gave his daughters enough dowry to marry twice. If you can imagine, which is unheard of. And actually giving enough money to your daughters to be able to do this it was unprecedented at the time. And to spread the wealth out, I think because he was the younger son of his father by his 3rd wife, who ended up, everyone else died. That's why he became rich, because everybody else died. I think he was particularly conscious of spreading things around. So I discovered he was also a trafficker, and that's what really drove me to come to the table. It was the knowledge, and the things I was discovering were so awful, so heinous, that I needed support. And I wanted to tell the true story of my family, but I also, it was very painful to make these discoveries. And they happen for a while. I mean, it's rare now that I get surprised, but still, I pull out an old will and find some reference to something. So coming to the table was an invaluable support for me.
Yeah. And Allison is, I don't know if she started before coming to the table or during, but she's writing a book.
Yes.
So yeah, so a lot of the history stuff has come in the process of writing that, and really digging into learning all of the stuff. Yeah. So for me, I was introduced to coming to the table by Tom and oh, I'm forgetting her name, Allison. The two people who
Well, you were pre-Jody.
Joy, yeah. So Joy DeGrew.
Jody.
Tom went on a ride with a woman.
Sharon.
Sharon.
Morgan. You were with Sharon.
Yeah, and they did a tour about this drive that they did together, and they wrote a book.
One white and one black. So they took each other's family places and celebrated holidays with each of their families, and it surfaced all kinds of differences about how they celebrate things.
And so it also put them on a book tour, but also in this place of working on healing. They actually met each other at a Mennonite organization, and that's what spawned this. Really, really interesting story. You should just go on Coming to the Table just to learn about that, and to learn about the book that they wrote together. So a friend of mine who knew me, actually an actor friend, and that I've known for now 30 years, invited me. She said, "You really need to come. You're going to love this. This is really where you live, right?" And I was like, "Okay, great, I'll come." And so I went, and when I was there, a mutual friend that I had met through this actor friend, Lisa McMurray, was there. And when they were talking, they talked about Coming to the Table organization. And Lisa, white woman, decided, and just a powerhouse, loving machine, decided, I'm going to start a group locally that night. And she mentioned it to me, and I was like, okay, great, whatever, fine. And then like a month later, she had put it together, and she had found a person actually who was related to one of the speakers to be her Black co-partner, and then other people like me. She invited us all to a luncheon, and she was like, "We're starting, let's figure it out." And so that's how I got involved in Coming to the Table in the local chapter. This was now 9 years ago. So it's 2 years before Allison came, 9 years ago. And as Allison says, it just, it seems like unbelievable that it was that long ago. And actually 2 years after Lisa had started the organization, she passed away. And she was really, and she still is in some ways, the backbone of our group. And so we really love having her as our founder, and the memory of her. Because for her, this work was just, it was clear. It was just totally clear. And there was no, yeah, there was like, this has to be done. And that was her commitment to it. And everybody who, the people on the steering committee, the people who committed to being there, that's the way that we operate. That's what's in, and that's why I'm still there. It's that foundation of we're committed to creating what I say is family. And yeah, that's important to me, and that's why I'm there. Yeah. So that leads us to the next place that Allison was going to, is how do we then, using the tools that we have and all that we have that we bring to the table, how do we enter into deep dialogue, right? And what does that mean? What does it mean to have deep dialogue in the context of racial discussions? Well, when Alice and I were talking about this, we thought, what comes up for us when we do that? And sometimes there are these words, right? These phrases, these vocabulary things that come up, not just for us, but for a lot of people. When you begin to talk about racial discussions, you talk about racism, racist, you talk about white fragility, you talk about, you talk about, you got to make, you talk about microaggressions, emotional labor, and centering. And what we thought was, would be good even in this group, is to kind of begin to explore that. And Alice and I can talk about it and talk about how some of those things impact us, right? So you can see, again, the kind of conversations that we have in coming to the table and how we enter into the deep dialogue and where that comes from. So one of the things that we talked about, I can start with, is this term microaggressions. And I think it's really important that when we talk about having deep dialogue and deep discussions, that those things don't just start or end in the coming to the table meeting. So that we're like churning over them and thinking about them and engaging with them during our life. Not in an unpleasant way, but because we want to grow and figure things out. That's what's happening. So when I think about that, one of the things that I think about is really being able to define these shortcut words that we use sometimes when we're in groups of people who want to work on racial healing, right? Microaggressions being one of them. And what that symbolizes is tiny little cuts. For example, for me as an African American, very often, sometimes that white friends, dear people to me, will say things that they don't recognize, or that's just sort of part of their tradition that that they would say, and it's like, ouch, ouch, ouch. And sometimes I'm immediately respond, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes that's because I don't know how in the moment, or sometimes because in the moment, if I do respond, I might be really ugly. And so I have to manage that and learning about those, I think, is a helpful way, you know, to help us to grow in conversation with each other. One of the stories Allison mentioned to me, she reminded me of sharing with the group that I had shared at Coming to the Table before, is, you know, a friend of mine, dear friend, white friend, I grew up a lot of my teenage years with, was there. And so his family knew me because I would go to their house and we're there. And that created a comfort, which is a good thing, but a comfort in a way that I think in the moment either made her feel like, you know, it could be a couple things. He's one of us. He's one of the good ones. Whatever, whatever, right? And so we were watching this show, and it was a pageant, and this African-American Black lady won the pageant, and wasn't, I mean, I said, I don't know if I would have picked her. I don't know that she was the best one for me. Just like I would have said about any white person or green person who I didn't think was the best one. But I was like, you know, but okay, she won. So then the mom said, she started this little conversation like, well, that's how they are doing things now. They always want to be chosen. They always want the best things. And then she said, I mean, this happened in the course of like a minute. She throws out these trails of things like, you know, when we were growing up, they had better schools than we did, but they wanted to come to ours.
Yeah.
And that Martin Luther King character, he created us such a problem. Now I am at this point, because I'm in college, like 18 or 19 years old, and I've known this person for 5 years, like in my life. Like, this is my friend's mother. And I just was like at a loss. And we actually did, like, I was like, what are you saying? We got into a discussion, but it was a challenge for me to have a discussion in that moment. And I managed it, right? But it was really hurtful. And we got into an argument, and I left with my friend, and he was like, how did you get into that discussion with it? Like it was my fault. So and I really don't, and this past, it was different for me, but his mom was sort of like this is where impact versus intention comes in as well, because her notion, I'm sure, was like, she didn't intend anything bad by that. And so she didn't recognize the impact that it had on me.
And often your friends would say, oh, come on, you know, she's a good person.
Yes, yes.
So my response to some of this is because you hear these stories about holiday gatherings, when someone brings a new boyfriend or girlfriend to the table and they happen to be a person of color, and then something horrendous is said, or maybe not as obviously horrendous. I think the one I always remember is they confuse, oh, you look just like so-and-so on TV, and they've just picked a generic black
person, or
whatever
Asian,
it is.
whatever it is, yeah.
And it's really one of the things that is hard to learn, but important, is that to me, this is my job as a white person to stand up and protect that person of color, because they're the ones who are alone at this table and they don't want to violate family rules. And what Wilson did was reflective of his comfort in that situation, but it also necessarily go that well. And your friend didn't help you out either.
No.
So that's where, how can I relieve and it doesn't mean I'm going to go nuclear on somebody. And we've all tried to learn techniques to say either how to defend someone or call, in a non-judgmental way, state what looks like just happened, which is what I find works the best. Try to get all the judgment out, and maybe people will listen. But to just let it go,
right,
is not being a helpful ally. It's not being a fully realized person in this work. And maybe I should segue to that story, Wilson.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So we had a leadership training. This is when it really hit home. I mean, you learn these things abstractly, and we had a circle of people who, many of whom were new to our group. They just showed up for this training, and we were teaching people how to come in the table and all that kind of stuff. And this one guy from out of town, I forget where he lives now, Midwest, I feel like. And he kept using the word slave, slaveholder, slave owner, slavery. And we generally use the word enslaved, because a person is not born a slave, they are enslaved by somebody. And using this language reinforces old views that are inaccurate about what the reality of that world was like. And he kept saying it, and I know that I was uncomfortable as he kept saying it, and I kept looking at the facilitator of the meeting, thinking the white facilitator was co-facilitator, and he never said anything. He didn't say anything. And it went on, and it happened again, and then it happened again. And finally, one of the Black women in our group exploded. And she's like, stop saying that. This is not how it should go. And then she whirled on the white people in the group, of which I particularly remember her looking at me because we were pretty good friends, saying, and why aren't you doing your job to tell him to stop saying it? Why did I have to do this? Why is this my emotional labor? And it was an earthquake in the group, because she really was upset, but it also brought the whole issue home. And I said, you're dying. And I said, well, I've been a WASP, I'm raised not to criticize people, and I don't want to embarrass him. And it's really hard. I'm so trained to be polite, and this is one of the problems. Politeness becomes a supreme guiding principle, which is an inauthentic thing to live by, just being polite. And Wilson turned to me and said, because I used the word wasp, and he said, can't you just get over it? And I thought, I have 400 years of DNA running through my veins. It's this training. Getting over. I'll try, but I remember just being speechless. But obviously, this happened in 2017. I mean, I've never forgotten it, because it was such a vivid example of how these things play out and how we need to do better.
I would also say, so, like, we make this an important thing to us.
Right.
We do. We really do. And so that trip, Allison and I, 4 years ago, really had some blow up, right? And I remember saying to Allison, and I know she remembers it. I was like, as part of that get over it, but it was in a different conversation. I was like, Black people do this all the time, and they move on. They heal, and then they figure out how to fix family. I don't hate you, because we keep coming back. We keep coming back. That's such a crucial and important part of it. Is and our coming to the table, we don't always do it right. And one of the things that we have figured, that we continue to learn, is that we have to keep working on it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to keep working on it. And it is a testament to our relationship that that's what we did. and what we do. And it's a testament to coming to the table because it gave us the space to do that.
And part of the expression of family and community in that case is that we kind of harry people who make mistakes to make sure they get what they did wrong. Like, we don't let it go. We kind of keep working to say, do you know, because some people have their default defense mechanisms. Often they default to white people default to and when I say white people, I'm not talking about you.
Right, right.
We're talking about as a behavior pattern. Often white people default to process. So we have people arguing, well, you weren't supposed to give that, oops. It really should have been so-and-so expressed that, oops. And I don't, or that, ouch. And why is that, it's like, that's just a defense mechanism. And some people are like, oh my God, you keep saying you white people, but you don't know me. And that's another white thing to do, which is we're not used to being treated like a group. Whereas people of color are often asked to speak for their group, but we're always treated like individuals. And this came up in that same leadership training. How many of you white people are going to stand with us at the barricades when we need you? And we're all like, how could you question me? I'm there with you. And that was the other big one. It was a very intense weekend. We had a lot of stuff going on. And one woman was crying, which is a way to take focus away from what's going on, which is the white fragility thing. So there's all these, these issues don't come up every meeting. It's not that lively.
No, they don't.
What's going on and what happened in other parts of our life that we're trying to figure out what derailed, or why is this thing upsetting us, or things that are upsetting us. I mean, we've went through George Floyd and through COVID and Trayvon Martin, a lot of stuff, right?
So what we're doing right now is Allison and I are having deep conversation. And we knew that coming in, like that we decided that this is what we would do. And we are so comfortable with each other that we knew that we could do that.
Unscripted.
Here. Because that's especially in our local chapter, that is what our focus is at coming to the table, is having conversations that lead us deeper into deeper relationship, connecting in that way, so that we discover things like, oh, I see what just happened. And Allison said it right. When I said, or somebody else in the group says, white folks do this, or you white people do this, the white people often thinks, oh my God, he is attacking me personally. It's all about me. And we're not. We're speaking in a generalization, as very often happens when people generalize Black people or Asian people or Native Americans. But as Allison said, in general, white people are not used to that. And so they hear it as a personal attack. And that's part of a learning in a conversation, that you really, like, we discovered how to put words on that together. Because we all had a sense of it, but we didn't really know what it was until at some point we were like, oh, I see. That's what's going on.
Vicky has her hand up.
Go.
I was going to say one thing, but then in this last thing I have to say, you could just look at them and say, oh, I know it's not fair to be lumped into a larger group, is it? Say nothing else. You just kind of call them out on it in a very non-threatening way. But what I really raised my hand for was, I loved your stories because they touched on so many of the elements you were trying to define, like the racism, the centering, the emotional labor. But there was one piece that I guess I'm unsure of, and where you were saying that it's up to us, white folk, to stand up. And being an Enneagram 8, I will stand up for anybody, anytime. But it kind of borders on white saviorism. And it can also be a microaggression. Like, do I not think they can stand up for themselves? Should I stand back until they get a chance? It's like everything else on this topic, it's incredibly delicate. And I guess I'm throwing in that, what do you think about it? How should I approach that myself.
Alice, do you want to go?
Well, I think in the Thanksgiving dinner scenario, there's no way a person of color will speak up for themselves in that scenario, or unlikely, because they don't know the family rules, and you're a guest, and when you're a guest, it's that much harder. I think that because we are in circle process, sometimes, although we do tend to jump in on ouch a little bit, you see how the circle goes around. I mean, I know that, I guess I haven't.
So
I know there are times when Wilson does say to me, "We're fine, Allison," because I worry about things a lot. And often Wilson and Fran has done this too, like, "We're going to be fine, Allison. We're used to navigating this territory all the time. Like, you're overthinking this and being overprotected. You can back down now," because, and that may be more borderline white saviorism, but what do you think, Wilson?
I think, Vicki, the thing that you said is spot on. This is nuanced. This is about context. It is about timing. It is about place. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to make a mistake. We fall down and we get back up. As Allison said, sometimes she may be overprotective. And I can just say, back down. Now, two things happen there. One, she just goes, "Okay, fine." And then I go, she is not the worst white savior person in the world, right? because there's work happening on both sides, right? And so that is how we get into relationship. And so I would say better to be overprotective and make the mistake than to not say anything at all and to have someone be dying. And you'll figure out, it'll get better with practice. You'll figure each other out. There have been times when I have said something really harshly that I apologize for, right? And explain where it came from. At some level, it doesn't, the explanation is helpful, but not the core. The core sometimes is just the apology and the heartfelt apology, the recognition that I wronged you. Because that was the impact.
Thank you.
I have to make a comment about running into basically Black paranoia. We lost a whole family of friends due to a child's paranoid interpretation of what my father, who I don't think had ever known a Black person, referred to him and said something about your people. Well, Black people aren't white people, they are different. And so my father unwittingly said your people. Well, the boy went home and told his parents. The mother called me, gave me hell, and we lost a whole family of friends because a child misinterpreted. My father was just using the terminology he knew, but the child didn't know that he didn't know, and it gets so complicated when you get down to all the semantics of the things you can say and you can't say. And then I have a question. Is not a person who has been enslaved and brought here, is he not, after he is enslaved, a slave? Do you call him an enslaved person? Yes. I mean, we get into this thing, it's kind of like calling fog the marine layer, as we do in LA. I mean, I think sometimes we carry it just too far and we complicate things.
Go ahead, Alice.
The language is important and has impact. And I think that's something we've talked about a lot in our group. And so what I would say is, if you're talking about a legal fact back in the day, sometimes people historically use the word slave, but we generally try to say an enslaved person. And so coming to the table brings together descendants of enslavers and descendants of enslaved people. And that's part of its mission, to come to the table.
I would say this too. It was one of the things that I talked to Allison about before coming here today. And part of the reason why we did vocabulary was to understand, sometimes we speak in certain ways because it is the lingo and the language of our community that we've grown into, and it's shortcuts, and we understand it, and it actually means something to us. We recognize that sometimes we have to explain that in a different way and to share that in a different way. I think it is an interesting thing, right? That we all have these sort of senses of, well, I am used to saying it this way. This is what I grew up with, and that's the way it has to be. And why do I have to bend? And I would just encourage us to know that there is room and opportunity for compromise, especially when you're talking about going across culture.
And
we have
just
to
add one more thing
ahead.
about enslaved, and then Melva and Will have their hands up, and Vicky. It's supposed to reflect the fact that being a slave is not a passive condition. Someone has to actively impose it on a human being for it to exist at all. It's an active, you have to, because people do not want to be unfree by choice. So the enslaver has to actively control all these things, often with violence and these things. So the words are reflecting what really happened, as opposed to how we've gotten used to talking things, which makes it seem more palatable or less awful. So that's the other reason, just to return to that one issue. But I do really want to move on to Melva's question. Well,
Melva.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, 2 comments. First, on the enslaved and enslaver, this is the first time I've heard about it, having been Black all my life. I just hadn't heard it discussed. So I'm thinking it's very likely somebody else didn't know about it. Then we take 25, 30 minutes to discuss it. And then we never get to the heart of what the issues are, which is today's issues of the imbalance of the races, because we take 30 minutes discussing vocabulary. And I find that in a lot of intellectual circles, that's what's happened. It gets intellectualized, and this word means this, and you never get down, not you personally, okay, but you never get down to the actual issues of what's going on, because we're discussing what this word means and why, and you miss the point. The second thing about paranoia, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they are out to get me. And why wouldn't I be paranoid, having been treated the way I've been treated all my life? Of course I am paranoid. I really am. So I think that's to be expected when you get into interracial discussions, that we certainly have some paranoia going on. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a right to feel offended, and it should be discussed, but expect paranoia. End of story.
So somebody.
Wait, Valerie has a quick comment.
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment. If it's a reality, is it a paranoia? I mean, this does happen, and it's not paranoia suggests that you're really obsessing or creating something in your mind that isn't necessarily true. But this is true. These things have and still continue to happen. So that's not paranoia, that's reality.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And all I'm saying is, don't dismiss my feelings and just call me paranoid.
Right.
Call it whatever you want, but this
and not paranoid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You have a point there.
No, I think Melva and Melva and Valerie are saying the same thing, and I appreciate that. And I just want to say, because I want to address something that was said in terms of the paranoia in this particular instance. I've said this 5 times because I think it's really important. In relationship, mistakes happen. And you know what? In relationships, sometimes you're going to lose a relationship. That doesn't define every other relationship. So going to what Melvin and Valerie is saying in terms of what you said, Sally, maybe, I don't know, I wasn't there, maybe their reaction was real and maybe it was based on paranoia in that particular situation. It becomes challenging when we call that particular family's paranoia Black paranoia, because it's not all Black people being paranoid about things that these people
No, I'm not
describe.
making general.
No, I know.
I'm
I
just,
know.
and specifically, I did not hear the comment, and we never did figure out what my father had said that the child interpreted wrongly, because my father would never have intentionally said anything to hurt a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, whatever he was. But the interesting thing was, this was a child of a family where the father was a corporate executive. They had succeeded in the world. And at that level, there was still this hypersensitivity, I will call it, to possible insult from a white male.
I would say, and then we'll go to the next person's question. I've succeeded as a Black man, and I will tell you that there's still the sensitivity to possible insult from a white man. It's about being in America. It's about being in America.
I think the hard thing is when these relationships are severed without any conversation, and that's what the table process, we keep working it through. And we've had people who just heard something and they left the meeting, they never came back because someone made a mistake and they weren't. And so we make a big deal about talking these things through so that we can heal. I mean, as Renee, one of our co-facilitators, says, until you have a fight, it's just a cocktail party. After that, it's a family. So this is part of the process.
Yes.
But it's talking it through. It's when someone goes, okay, that's it, I'm done with you, I'm leaving the group, and I think that's what you experience, your family experience, Sally. It was you never understood it, what happened. It just, that friendship was over. And I think we always feel that loss.
Yeah.
Well, it generalized to our whole family when it was actually someone who was just visiting who committed. And it wasn't between us and their family. They knew we were close, but because another tangential relative said something, we were blamed. And so that's a whole other topic for discussion. Is why was our whole family guilty when one person made a mistake?
Yeah.
It's not fair.
No. No conversation happened. But let's go to Will. He's been very patient with his hand up for a while.
Oh my God.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, I'm Will Fuller. I got in late. I was just at the very end of the discussion of the touchstones.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating conversation because what we're talking about here is a very sensitive area because I would use the word judgment. People make judgments. This is hyper or hypo, or this is good, or this is bad, or this is inappropriate. And we do that routinely. I do it all the time. And there's a quote from Rumi that out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there's a field. I will meet you there. And the sense of going beyond the fear of our judgments or the judgment from our fears to getting together and meeting each other, I think is somewhat at the heart of the experiment that Tom and Sharon did and you all are doing, to let's see what it takes to get together in spite of all these nasty feelings we go back and forth. And because of them, because they are so strong. And that it's hard to get, I use the term suspending judgment. Doesn't mean that I quit judging. It's just, I'm not going to let it get in my way.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what we're about here.
Yes. Will, you have an amazing voice.
I don't know if Vicki had Sorry.
Yeah, I did. I had a comment because to me, I feel very strongly words matter. Language creates thought and beliefs and vice versa. And I think the difference between slave and enslaved is no minor verbal tick. It's kind of like if anybody on this panel who's a parent, when you were raising your child, did you tell them they were a bad boy, or did you say they've done a bad thing? When you call somebody a slave, you're saying that's what you are. But when they're enslaved, that's something that happened to them. So I'm trying to give an example that has nothing to do with race. It just has to do with the fact of words matter. And when you call somebody a thug or a criminal or a slave, it creates in your own mind, intentionally or not, this whole aura of now what they are. You've reduced them to something that may be transitory. I think words matter.
Can we pause for a moment here, everybody? Because we're coming to the closing time.
You speak up,
And
Wilson.
yeah. I actually turned down so that I could not lose my ears. And so I'm going to turn it back up. Okay, there we go. All right, and I'm gonna speak a little louder. So let's just take a moment, because we're almost to the end of the time, and just indulge me. Breathe in with me and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. The really, really great thing about coming to the table is this conversation. And we didn't get to the end of it. We're not going to get to the end of it today. But what we did do was enter in and get our thought processes working and energy happening. And we also, I want to think, participated in trying to come together, just in the little moments that we shared, trying to hear one another and also speak what's in our hearts. All the healing doesn't happen in one day. Family doesn't happen in one day. It's constant practice. And it's what we invite you to join us in at Coming to the Table. Dick has our information. You can write to either Allison or I on the steering committee. You can certainly probably get through to us if you're on Facebook. There's a Southern California Facebook group. You can get to us through the national group Coming to the Table. We would love to have you there. And I'm telling you, it's worth it. And I'm telling you, there's going to be, I say this all the time, Allison and Dick will know this. It is hard work, but it is also many of the people at Coming to the Table are people that I go to talk about life. Forget about race, to talk about life. Because as Allison was quoting Renee, you know, I just don't, I've said this too, you can't, there are very few people that you love in your life that you haven't fought with, that you haven't gone through something in order to come onto the other side and really understand the value of your relationship. People that you always have glossed over, everything is beautiful with, they're not the people that you're gonna, you know, lie down in the street for. So I'm sharing that to round out this for us. That is Coming to the Table. That is the discussions, that's the stuff that we have. And yes, it is hard work. It is hard work. It is. But when you get through to the other side, it really is rewarding.
Well, Wilson, great. Thank you very much. I want to thank you and Allison for coming and telling us about coming to the table. And I want to say that I think you did a great job in explaining what coming to the table is all about. But not only that, I think in the discussion, you really kind of illustrated what coming to the table is, because this was basically a coming to the table conversation that we had. And so I thank you very much for coming. And I want to thank everyone in the group for participating in what I think was a fine discussion. This is recorded. It'll be put up on the website when we get our blog post up. It usually takes us a few days to get that done, but we'll get it up and get the link up there so you can tell your friends about this and have other people come. And we had kind of a small turnout today, but we do get readership on the blog, and it's available there. I know we have a lot of people who are on our mailing list and can't make it here for one reason or another, and they do follow up. They do read the blog and they do look at the presentation. So I think other people will see this as well. So thanks to everybody for coming. And
Valerie,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. I went to the website that Allison, you put into the chat, and it took me to an error page on Zoom.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why that is. I just posted another registration link. So hang on one sec, Dick, and let's see if when I do it, it shows I've already registered. So see if it works.
Okay, this wasn't the Facebook one. This was the one you originally.
Right, the Zoom.
The new one works, Allison.
Okay, try the new one, Valerie. She just said the new one.
And for anyone who doesn't know, if you go to the participant screen on your toolbar there and click on that, you can open it up and there's a save chat button. So you can save the chat to your, it'll download the chat to your computer as a text file. And you can get it from there if it's inconvenient and you didn't get it from here. But go to that save chat on the participant screen.
I believe it's on the chat screen, actually, but yeah.
Chat screen,
The chat screen, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just do a save chat and that'll put it on your computer for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dick, for inviting us. And thank you all for having Allison and us here, me here. You're great.
Well, thank you. We look forward to seeing everybody at our next presentation.
Sally wanted to say something.
I just want to say, Wilson, I speak as someone who lived on the edge of the Navajo Reservation for 30 years. And I would just like to suggest that each of us view someone who is different as a resource from whom you can learn.
Absolutely.
I lived in Atlanta for a while too. And I just view people who are different as these marvelous founts of information and art and music. And I think it's an appreciation level. We could quit talking and start just feeling.
All right.
All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. We look forward to seeing you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.